Thank you for joining me on this episode of Lips Garage. This is going to start my bonus series called Countdown to PowerTour. Today is Tuesday, April 26th, and I have approximately 6.5 weeks to get my car ready to go. In my previous bonus update, I did kind of let you know what got me to this point. I do have the intro to the car, so you should have a little more history on that. I'll probably repeat a few things and maybe pick up some things I missed in the intro. What I'm working on right now, number one on my list, is at the end of the season last year, coming back from a car show, I did develop a pretty good shimmy or a hop coming out of the right front. I went through the common situations. I made sure I didn't have a lug nut, come back loose. I took a look at the suspension, made sure a tie rod wasn't bad, a ball joint wasn't bad. Took a look, it doesn't seem to be any break in any of the tires, so it's not anything like that. So where I'm at now is either an imbalance in the tire, maybe through a tire weight or something, or potentially I did install a set of wheelwood brakes, which I'd never done before. There's a chance maybe I had messed up something in there. Or maybe there's another piece of suspension that's giving me some issue that I just haven't found yet. So when you're looking at the suspension, there's a couple things that are going to be primary to look at. And with suspension, especially on the front end of a car, we're going to be talking about some alignment terms as well. So there's going to be three basic angles to an alignment, and this is the real basic, and it's all going to change depending on the vehicle you have. But if you're looking at the front tires, your toe is going to be how they point or spread away from each other. Your camber is going to be how they ride this way. And then caster is difficult to explain, but basically it's going to be the center line of the front suspension and where everything's in relation to that. So toe a lot of times is going to be if you're pulling to the left, pulling to the right, and that's also going to give you tire wear. Camber, be very similar. If you've got extreme camber on one side or the other, that can lead to tire wear as well, and just different handling. Caster generally isn't going to do tire wear, but that's going to be like return to center. A lot of performance drivers will adjust their camber, so your tire in a corner is going to sit straighter than it will. You think if you load up a suspension, you're going to have a tire, the contact patch of the tire, is going to shift as you're going through your suspension, going through your handling. So if you say you're on a circle track and you're only turning left, say NASCAR, they would adjust their alignment, so in a corner, they're going to have max contact. Straightaways, yeah, you want to have traction, but the better you can handle in a corner, the faster you're going to go, the less speed you're going to scrub. And that's getting a lot more technical than what we need for today. Caster, again, is going to be if you're going to be doing road racing, you want the vehicle to return to center as quickly as possible, and that's going to take care of some oversteer and understeer. But generally speaking, a factory alignment is going to be the best ride and the best overall handling. So with that being said, tire rods are generally what's going to be your toe adjustment. Ball joints is generally going to be affecting your camber. And then different vehicles, again, are going to have adjustments different ways depending on the suspension setup. So when we're taking a look at the vehicle, a good way to test your tire rods, it helps if you have somebody underneath the vehicle, but for demonstration purposes, basically put your hand on opposite ends of the wheel, and we're just going to rock it back and forth. Now you're going to have some movement, especially in this vehicle that doesn't have the steering that gets locked, like a newer vehicle will have a lock column. So this one, although there's movement, you don't feel any, thunk, 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 thunk kind of thing, where if something was loose, this is going to move. If you got your center bar, if you got something loose, this is going to move, but this won't. So you'll actually feel that bottom out. Same thing with ball joints. Ball joints, depending on the suspension type, you can check one of two ways. A lot of times you can just grab it top and bottom, and you can, find movement up and down. If that doesn't work, if you got different types of suspension, a lot of times you can get a bar underneath. Again, have somebody underneath taking a look, and you can lift up and kind of mimic road conditions, and you can see if we've got some ball joints moving. So I've done that before. Everything feels tight. About the only thing that I'm noticing is my idler arm, which again on this particular vehicle, it's not rack and pinion. At the end of the steering gear, you're going to have your pitman arm, and then as you move your steering wheel, that pitman arm is going to shift back and forth to actually steer your tires. Well, on the opposite end, in which case is the passenger side, you're going to have a bar attached to the frame that essentially just holds up that end of the steering. So that's called your idler arm. So I do have a little bit of play in that one, but everything else feels tight. The gentleman I got the car from said he had the suspension, or excuse me, the front steering done not too long ago. Right now, I have already bought everything, a lower control arm with a ball joint. I bought an upper ball joint. I got new idler arm. I got all new tie rods. There's two pieces, especially being an older car, that are going to be hard to find. One is going to be the center link or the drag link. So the pitman arm is going to attach to that center link, and that's going to be what moves left and right. And then your tie rods are going to come off to finish the attaching. So that is not a replaceable unit. That's a rebuildable unit, at least for this age of vehicle. So I can mail that in, they can rebuild it and send it back to me for like $250 plus shipping. I'm hoping I don't have to go that route. Again, that felt tight enough underneath. The other one is going to be the pitman arm itself, which is not a buildable unit, it's a replaceable. That very rarely fails. Usually if you're changing a pitman arm, it's because you can't get other stuff off of it. It's all seized, and then you replace the pitman arm. The other thing would be the steering gear itself. I don't believe it's the steering gear because, again, it is isolated to this right front. So the first thing I'm going to do, which is going to be interesting with this, is I'm going to rotate the tires side to side. And what that's going to do is, if it is a tire issue, whether it be a balance situation, whether it be a hard spot, or say a break in the belts, what that'll do is it will follow to the left side. So if I do the side to side rotation, get it back on the highway, and it follows it to the left side, then I know it's a tire situation. My next step will be to take them in, have a tire shop take a look at them, spin them up, make sure they're balanced okay. Now, the one reason why I think it's not going to be a balance is it started all of a sudden. You know, I drove it about 35 miles to the car show. It was fine. And about halfway back from the car show, it just all of a sudden started. So that's originally what made me think it possibly threw a wheel weight. So in this particular vehicle, or I should say this particular style of rim, I do have a little lip. Let me get the camera in the right spot here. I do have a little lip around the edge of the tire, or the edge of the rim, I should say. And that would be something you could clip a weight onto. So they'll find the heavy spot and they'll put a weight on the opposite end to try and balance it out. For performance vehicles or show vehicles or whatever, even regular road vehicles, if somebody doesn't want the look of that clip-on weight here, then we're going to be looking at, let's see if I can find it in the camera, we're going to be looking at a tape weight here. And I do have another set over here. And what that does, it does very similar. It's not quite as good of a job if you're not all the way out on the extremes of the wheels. But it's going to be able to do it without having something unsightly on the outside. So I don't believe it's a matter of throwing a wheel weight, but I'm going to, again, do this swap side to side. Now, the big issue with that, I do have directional tires, so they are made to spin one way and one way only. Now, if you flip that side to side, there's a lot of common misconception if you're not into tires. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to increase wear. It's not going to damage the tire in any way to have it run the opposite direction of what it's intended to. The only thing that changes is you do not necessarily get the benefit of having that type of tire. All right, I've removed the rim from the vehicle, and the first thing we're going to take a look at, just to reiterate what I was talking about before, this here, you're going to see this tire is made to rotate in this particular way in a clockwise direction. So we look at the tread, we can see the tread design is made to do that. It's going to have different enhancements, especially in dry weather traction. If we spin it around, you can see it's not really designed to go that way. So while we've got it loose, and give you a better view of those wheel weights that we're talking about, this is on the inside, and this is on the outside of the rim. So generally what I was looking for is a clean spot where that's just a two-sided tape. Looking for a clean spot that a wheel weight may have fallen off of. And again, as I go through and look both on the center and the outer edge, I'm really not seeing anything like that. Again, I'm running my hands along the tread. I'm trying to feel for any irregularities in the wear. A lot of times it's called feathering. Sometimes it's called chopping, all depending on the type of wear it is. Usually if you've got a broken belt, you'll have a really, really solid high spot. And I'm not really getting any of that. So again, I'm pretty confident the tire is okay, but what I'm doing is going to be basically a free diagnostic. It just takes a little bit of time. You want to make sure when you're tightening your wheels that you're tightening them in a star pattern. We'll get into that in a moment. And we want to make sure they're good and torqued correctly. Now, taking a closer look at this brake setup, you want to make sure that we don't have any contaminants on the hub. We're doing okay there, just a little bit of a spider mess there, but nothing hardcore, no rocks or anything. Looking for any signs that we've had any rubbing somewhere, you know, both in the wear of the rotor. You see any, you know, we'll say like here, there's no signs of any bumping or any rubbing here. Everything looks to be in pretty good shape, so I'm a little bit at question as to what's going on, but I'll go ahead and do this diagnostic. And see, I've already got the other side pulled off. Taking a look here, and that's gonna be the same. We've got good shape there for the wheel weights. Gonna roll through. There's another spot there. This one actually only took weights on one side, which is pretty cool. And again, we're double checking the wear of the tire. Really nothing that jumps out as a surprise. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate these side to side, get them all torqued back down, and head for a quick road trip and see if I can see any changes. All right, I've got my rim switched over and I'm going to tighten everything down. A couple things on wheel installation. I've seen actually some videos recently about this. This guy here, this colored piece here, is called a torque stick or a torque limiting stick. So what you do is if you have an impact, this one's an electric one, if you got a pneumatic, whatever. The idea behind this guy is you can run down a bolt, a lug nut, whatever it is, and that's going to keep it from exceeding a torque value. This particular one is set at 100 foot-pounds, and it is set as a 1/2 inch open end, so you can put whatever socket on it that you want. They have different lengths, different sizes, different torque ratings. Some of them have the specific bolt size on the end of it. Some of them are open like this guy. The idea behind this is as you're running it down, you snug it up, and then that's going to keep you from over tightening it. This thing is not meant to set final torque. Throughout my years of being a tire guy, I've discovered that if you hammer on these things, you can get a 100 foot-pound torque stick to torque it upwards of 120 foot-pounds. So it is not designed to set your final torque. It is only designed to keep you from over torquing when you're doing your initial rundown. So you zip them up. Again, you want to do a star pattern. This one in particular is a 5-bolt. So you'll start here, jump one to here, jump one to here, jump one to here, jump one to here. I'll usually go all the way around in the star pattern, then I'll do one more, you know, just in a regular rotational pattern. You put just enough pressure on the tire to keep it from turning. Then you get your torque wrench and you tighten it down to spec. This one with this particular rim and the brake package that I have is 100 to 105 foot-pounds of torque. If you don't have that equipment, generally Walmart will do a torque check for you. Generally they only do it if you have bought your tires or gotten any kind of tire service there. But if you ask really nicely, they generally will double check your torque. The worst thing you want to do is either A, not torque them tight enough, have those lug nuts come loose and lose your wheel while you're driving, or the other way around, you have them cranked so hard that if you have any issue on the side of the road, you are not able to break those loose without having power tools. So again, there is a system in place for this to make sure everything works as needed. You don't want to just hammer on that torque stick. You just get them good and snug, and then you set your final torque with a torque wrench. So I've got my road test done, and the shape did change from the right side to the left side. So my next step is going to be to take the tires over to a tire shop, have them take a look, make sure the balance is in good shape, and then I will do a road test after. So that does save me a little time about not having to do the front end, but since I have the parts, I may go ahead and do it anyway, depending on how I get on the rest of my projects. Well, after my test drive and coming down with at least an idea what's going on with my wobble, I'm going to be taking a look at a couple other things on my list. I did toss the wiper arms back on that I was able to find, like I said last time I was doing some cleaning. The wiper blades themselves look like they're in fairly decent shape. What we're looking for is any kind of cracking, any tearing, checking to see if there's any rollover on the blade. Later on, I will miss the windshield to make sure I've got good contact and still pretty good cleaning capability. These are a little more difficult to find. There's not a lot of auto parts houses that are carrying the old school, just the insert. Most of newer vehicles are just going to replace the whole wiper blade. So I've got them on, so that part of the list is half crossed off, but I do want to ensure that they're going to be good and safe when I'm on my drive. Next thing I'm going to be looking at are the seats. Again, I did put these guys in. It did have a factory bench in it that I donated to another gentleman that was building the vehicle, and it did match the bench here. Originally, this car was a champagne gold color. The gentleman did paint it a maroon, and he did have the seats lined to match. So that is the factory badging. I don't know, I'm sure there's a term for it, I'm forgetting. But that did come with the vehicle. So I'm going to be looking at the seats. Now, one of the other projects that I have for the time being is going to be a first generation Fox body. And I've heard pretty good things about the seats out of those, so I did scrap that. The Fox body is going to be disappearing here shortly. I did make a deal for that to be gone. But in the meantime, I can take a look at the seat. So a couple things you want to pay attention to when you're doing a project like this. You want to have functionality, you want to have comfort, you want to have design, but you need to have style as well. Something like this car here is really easy to stand out incorrectly. I did have a set of newer Crown Vic seats that were comfortable, they fit. The only real issue with them is because Crown Vics are a 4-door, it didn't have a rock forward like these guys do, so it made it a trick getting in and out of the back with the top up. And they didn't really go with the design or with the era of the vehicle. Some people that matters, some people it doesn't. Normally, I'm a function over form, but in this particular build, it's got to kind of look the part. So I'm taking a look at these guys. The mounting is pretty similar. It's just 4 standard bolts that lock everything down. I do need to measure the gapping both side to side and front to back and make sure that the drop matches what I have now. So I will get underneath, I will unbolt these seats and see how the Fox looks. With any luck, the only difference is maybe drilling a hole or two to get everything to line up if I like the way that it feels otherwise. With the seat removed from the Fairlane, first thing we're going to take a look at, again, is going to be the spacing of the bracketry or the sliders. So we're going to take a look at this dimension here, and we're going to take a look at this dimension here as compared to the Fox body. So if we go center to center on this guy, we're looking right about 15.5. If we go from center to center here, we're looking, just over 12, maybe as much as 12.25. And when I look this way, side to side, we're about 11. And if we go front to back, we're looking about 14.5. So obviously not quite the same dimension. And if we look, this part here is rather flat. Here we're looking at a pretty good raise. Now neither one of these things are going to keep me from taking a look and going to the next step. If we look at this is kind of flat. This one's got a little bit of a angle to it. So if I like the seat otherwise, and it's just a matter of doing some shimming or doing a little bit of modification to work, it's not the end of the world. It really depends on what you're willing to do to get something that looks good and is comfortable for you. If I put the vehicle or the seat in the vehicle and I'm not really happy with the style of it, and if I'm not really happy with the comfort or how it sits level as compared to the steering wheel and the seat, or excuse me, with the top, then I'll take a look and see if there's some older generation Mustangs. The other one I would like to try and take a look at if I can get my hands on is an SN95 Mustang seat. Those, on the shoulder of those, the seat belts are built into the seat itself. So with this one being a convertible and not having a shoulder belt, in the interest of safety, if I like how those sit and how they feel and how they look, that'd be another consideration. So when you're doing this kind of stuff, especially if you're using something non-factory, you've got a lot of different decisions to make and what you're willing to sacrifice or what are your have-to-haves when you're building a vehicle. So I'm going to put the Fox body seat in here. I do have some more cleanup to do. One thing that is nice while I'm doing some modifications is I've changed the seat, I changed the carpet. I have put boom mat underneath it, which made a big difference in the ride sound and the ride quality. But it's not going to be so much that I can't just peel the carpets back to do whatever modifications I need to do. I'm not really happy with how I set that. I think I did cut it a little bit short for what I'm going to do. There's a chance it was only like 150, 180 bucks for this thing. I got it a couple years ago. Worst case, with the cost of everything else that I'm doing, another 200 bucks to do the carpet again is well worth the learning experience for what I've got. But onto the seat. So I've got the seat placed in the vehicle, kind of where I would have it sit if I were to use this one. And there are some definite pros and cons with it. One, it is a little bit of an older seat, so the cushions are going to be a little wore out, not hugely comfortable at the moment. But it is a bit narrower than what that other seat was, so the console would definitely fit. I'm taking a look at some of the features of this particular seat. So it does have an adjustment here for the side bolsters. It'll tighten them up or loosen them out if you're doing something a little more relaxed or something a little more spirited for driving. It does have an adjustable knee bolster. I'll get this slide out here. So again, it'll give you a little more support where you may or may not need it at any given time. It does give me the flip forward feature. There is a little air bladder to give me a little more lumbar support. So for the age, it's out of a 1980. It's actually got quite a few features on it. And for the most part, it is pretty comfortable. The only real issue that I have with it at the moment is I do sit awfully high as compared to the roof line. So when I have the roof up, I might run into some issue with some clearance. And the last thing I need is any more smacks on top of my bald head. So I have the option of either putting in some aftermarket tracks or doing some more modification to the seat itself. What I'm going to do right now, I know this is a viable option. I am going to put this back in the Mustang because, again, I'm going to be getting rid of that this weekend. But I know that a Fox body is a viable option, just needing some a little more modifications. So I will go back to the drawing board, get onto the forums, a little more research what people are using, and I might try a couple of different styles of seat before I finally decide on what I'm after. One of the next projects I'm going to be looking at is working on the trunk. Again, with some of the modifications that I've done, getting rid of some of the trim. I do have some open holes where that trim came through. We do have just not a real sealed up cabin considering the age and the use of the vehicle before. So one of the things I want to do for sure is clean up and seal up the trunk. Again, if we're taking this on the road trip, I'm going to be having, clothes and things back here that I don't want to have the exhaust in the car smell on. So I do want to make sure I'm running a little bit better. Also, this here is just a little separator plate, or mat, I should say. That right there in this particular vehicle is the gas tank. It is in the trunk. There's no separator, there's no liner. That is the gas tank. So I want to make sure that I am fully sealed just in case I throw something back here, that I'm not going to risk damaging either the tank itself, or right here's going to be the fuel neck, comes in through the license plate as all the old school ones did. And if you can kind of peek through here, this is going to be where the top reclines, and you can actually see the back of the seats right up here. So when I did my boom mat, I did seal up a little bit of that as much as I could, but I'm going to pop them seats out and do a little more reinforcing, keep some separation in the cabin. And I'm going to actually see, because very rarely do I have more than just the two kids in the back, I'm going to see how difficult it would be to maybe mount a speaker back behind the center divider here. Not necessarily something to protrude through. I can't quite do like you would in a hard top and just throw, say, a subwoofer back there, because the roof does need a place to recline into when I fold it up. Take a look here where a lot of people will put them. One will interfere with the window knob, and then there's actually not a whole lot of space back behind here or a whole lot back behind here to put that kind of speaker. The other thing I'm looking at, depending on what I do for a seat, is they do have some of the subwoofers that will fit, just a little square subwoofer underneath the seat. And I don't need anything to be super, super loud, but I would like to be able to hear it when I'm driving down the road. Again, for sound, I do have some aftermarket speakers in the kick panels, and they work all right for what they do, just not enough to do the whole thing. These guys did come optioned. You can see a little better here with a center speaker in the dash, and I will hook that up to the front channel. So again, a little bit here, a little bit there, especially with my ADD. I've got a couple different projects going at one time, but I'm well on the way of getting some accomplishments on my list. Taking a look into the trunk, I cleaned everything out, kind of scraped up what was left. It's not perfect, but it's not meant to be a show car. I did plug up some of the holes. I can kind of see with a couple threaded nuts just to get them covered, and again to keep any noxious fumes from coming into the trunk. I've got one more I need to take care of there, and then I've got a couple from where there was a bolt-on trailer hitch to it. Again, this here is the actual gas tank. So I'm going to find some foam I can fill the perimeter with, and maybe put some carpet around a piece of plywood or something just to give a little more protection. I don't want anything to fall and actually rupture the tank. Walk into the front. I am working on the interior a little bit. So I got the seats pulled out, redoing the seat belts. I did have a couple of them installed backwards. They do work just fine, or they did work just fine, I should say. But especially for showing purposes, you kind of want it to look the way it needs to. I did get some seat covers that will match the front and the rear. Wide out shot. I am working on the cover for the back. It's a little bit odd size, so I'm going to seam it up. Actually have my mom seam it up for me and close up a couple of holes that were in there for a factory headrest that I don't have. And then I should be able to get that back in. The other big thing I'm looking at is seats. Have you seen from another episode? That is the seat that I was running with. It's supposed to be for a Fairlane. Period correct, obviously, does need some help with the material. Kind of outdated, and especially in a vehicle like this with no shoulder harness, if you are driving a little more aggressive, you tend to slide a little bit more. Now, the first set of seats that I put in were these guys here. This is out of a newer Crown Vic. They were very comfortable, and the factory bracketry actually worked really well to it. They did ride a little bit high, and a Crown Vic being a four-door did not have a provision to be able to rock the seat forward so the passengers could get into the rear. The next option I was looking at was the Fox Body Mustang seat. Fit okay in the vehicle. Wasn't really super excited about the style. Did fit a little bit better than that one did, especially with the narrow seat. Definitely has the side bolsters to hold you in. And then the other ones I was looking at was an 07 Mustang seat. These are extremely comfortable, but the bracketry is nowhere near what I need it to be. So if I kick all these onto their back, now I've already taken the brackets off of this one for what I decided to do. This is the bracketry for that Crown Vic for the Fox Body and for the 07 Mustang. So these were pretty flat and pretty basic, pretty easy to manipulate. Again, this one was super comfortable, but with the electric motors and not having the provision in the vehicle, really didn't make sense to put them on. These here, the brackets have a rise to them where mine were flat. And with the dimensions of this seat, as you can tell, it's taller than it is wide. This one's wider than it is tall. It would have taken a lot more monkeying around to get those to fit the way that I wanted to. And then taking a look at the Mustang, the newer Mustang seat, excuse me. This one, once you get under the bracketry, has a pretty flat base to it. And this ended up being what I was going with. So what I ended up doing off camera, just because I wasn't sure how it was going to record, I took what the mounting was for that one to mount it to the seat, and then I took the frame of that one, and it wouldn't quite fit exact. So what I did is I mocked up some wooden pieces where I would need to bolt that to the current frame out of the Fairlane seat, and then a couple more holes to bolt it to the Mustang frame. Once I got it where I liked and had it sitting where I wanted to, I ended up having some metal brackets made. So I've already got the other seat mounted in. I wanted to make sure that it fit and everything. I do have some work to do to get these to fit on the passenger side. I have not gotten that done yet. But the finished product, I think, looks pretty good. Again, I do have the aftermarket seat covers. I will have to kind of steam them a little bit to get it to fit a little bit better. But they're comfortable. They've got the side bolster. They do rock forward to give the entrance into the back. I've got to work on the sliders a little bit. The one thing that this thing has that I may or may not keep, pardon the back and forth, are the headrests. They're a little bit aggressive for this particular car. If I want to, it takes a little bit to do it, but I can actually remove that headrest and give it a low back bucket kind of feel. I kind of like them being on there, but I'm not super married to them. The other thing that I will have to do is pull off that buckle there, because it is not needed. The buckles that I have, the seatbelt harnesses that I have, do not work with that style. So I've got quite a bit more work to do here. Get that seat replaced, get the cover in, get one heck of a vacuum job, get cleaned up. And once I get that other seat back taken care of, the interior is just about done. I do want to work with getting a cover for there. I am going to have to shim that steering wheel up just a little bit. I do tend to rack my knuckles when I'm driving. It's a little bit tight. I really wanted to get a tack in here. Don't think I'm going to get that far. Again, I'm not going to be able to get the floor shift in. That console, I'm just not happy with the way it worked. So I'm going to end up just getting something for the drive, for the trip for now. Just like I said, hold my coffee cup or whatnot first thing in the morning. The narrower seats will definitely help. I don't know if you can see that this one overhangs the trans tunnel a whole lot more than this one does. Some of that has to do with how I bolted the seat in. But so far, coming along. I might go ahead and wrap up this video once I show the mounts on the bottom of the seat. And then the next step will be getting it in the air and getting everything underneath. So we're taking a look at the bottom side of the Mustang seat. It mounts to the frame on 4 bolts on the other end of these studs here. And I do already have them loose. We take a look at anything else that's going to keep this thing from coming off. In this particular instance, there's going to be a couple of electrical connections, a couple where a couple wires are going to clip to it. I've already got them loose, so this whole frame piece can come off now. So once we get that frame out of the way, we can see what's left. In this particular case, I'm leaving all the electronics part of it. If I decide to change my mind later, or if I decide to hook up the electronics, or whatever option that I have, I want to leave them here. If I end up changing to a completely different seat down the road, I want to be able to reconnect these, so I might be able to sell them and recoup some of my investment. But with everything removed, we can see that the lower portion of the seat is a pretty flat frame. And taking a look at the adapters that I made, essentially these are going to sit across, and 2 of these holes are going to mount to the frame, 2 of these holes are going to mount to the seat, and then I've got a front and rear. After messing with the driver's seat, I know where I've got my holes located, got all those punched out, and then I'm actually going to do a little bit of spacing, some between the adapter and the seat, some between the new frame and the adapter, to make sure I have it sitting at a nice comfortable level, everything's able to move back and forth, and I've got no issues with fitment. Now with the Fairlane seat out of the car, we can take a look at the tracks on this one. We do have just a couple of easy screw heads to pop out of that one. Thankfully they are coming loose pretty well. I'm having a little bit of an issue with this track being jammed up, which I had free before, so I know I can break it loose again. Once I get this off, again, the track is going to be pretty flat, pretty straightforward, and essentially just space it and bolt it, making sure I keep my spacing here correct, because I have to have my mounting bolts where they need to be in the floor. And my measurement here is 15.5 inches side to side, which will meet up with the holes that I've already got drilled in my adapters. Next step, getting that frame off and getting them bolted to the adapters. And with all the pieces together, you can loosely see how everything's going to work. So we've got the Fairlane frame mechanism with the mounts for the floor. We'll go into this bracket on the outside holes that I've got drilled here. And then when I position the bracket where I want to, I will drill holes for the inside that will mount to the seat frame. Using grade 8 hardware, which is the recommended strength for automotive use or better. Now, some of the issues that I did have to deal with and things that were caught off camera is this guy here. This is to activate the forward and back motion of it. So I set the original frame back as far as I could to be able to still have that where it needs to be. Now, that put the seat way too far backwards. I'm about 5'10", my wife is a couple inches shorter than I am, and all the way forward it was okay and fairly comfortable for me, but she never would have been able to drive it comfortably, especially when you consider how far the throw was on the clutch. So I had to do some modifying, which in some instances may sound extremely tedious and a lot of design work. This one I got really super lucky. My modification went to the extent of bending that arm straight. Having done that, I can seat this back far enough. Again, I do apologize for the herky-jerky camera. I can set this back as far as I need to be comfortable. And on the driver's seat, the way I had positioned that, get this back out of the way again, was my frame would sit, kind of hard to see, there's a little ridge right here. My frame would sit just at the bottom of that ridge. And then with that, I do have 3/4 inch spacers to bring this guy up. And I will actually have that, I believe, in 3 corners, if I remember correctly. And then the last corner, because the floor dips a little bit more on that inside edge, I have a 1-inch spacer to get everything where it needs to be. So maybe nothing that would win any concours restoration events, but it does get a much more comfortable and practical seat for what we're doing in there. Once I get that done, again, I do have some cleaning up to do in the floor. Again, I was able to locate and rebolt the seat belts in, which was a very high priority for the missus. That does help keep the carpet in place because I did not glue it down. So the bolting of the seat belts, the bolting of the seats will help kind of keep everything located where it needs to be. For the rest of the interior, still working on the back seat. I've got to put in the kick panels after I changed the speakers, a little bit hard to see. And then we have a very, very, very dated door panel. With today being kind of a rainy, grubby day, I'm going to see what I can do with that. The one on the driver's side is off because I'm still working on the window. So I've got a couple ideas of what I want to do. Either myself or my daughter having a little bit more of a steady hand. I'm going to see if I can dress that up a little bit for what we're doing. And getting closer to the last step. So I've got the frame bolted to the bracket or the adapter bolted to the seat. There's one of my spacers. Come into the back, same thing. Making sure I've got the correct hardware, making sure I've got everything bolted, torqued down. The slides work the way that they need to. My handle is free to move when it moves. Again, got to free that one up a little bit. The last step is to put the cover on, and I'm actually going to run the elastic that holds the cover underneath the tracking here, making sure all this stays out of the way. This is the kind of bracket spring connector that does the seat release to move the tracks forward and back. I may not have that fully operational. I am missing a couple of the return springs on both seats. So I'm going to go to my guy that I get a lot of my old Ford parts from and see if he's got a couple or if he's got another seat I can use for reference if I've got to replace the springs. So we're getting very, very, very close to finishing up the interior portion of the car. Here we are a couple days later. I have the front seats installed. I've got the rear done, still waiting to finish on that back panel. Not the best thing in the world, but I did get a seal strip on the back of the window. It's got a little wrinkle in it. I may redo that depending on how much time I have. Taking a look, I do have some new door pulls on order, as well as a couple other surprise pieces that may or may not get here in time. But the other thing I'm going to be doing for interior that I've got to wait for a little bit more time to do. So just bring a little bit of color into the door panel, and then that wood there I will probably end up painting black or doing like a black vinyl or something on there. Again, I'm gonna have some new door pulls coming because that one's always been in rough shape. I need to refinish the sill plates. Again, I think when I trimmed my carpet, I trimmed it a little bit short so it doesn't hold as well as I would like to. Here you can definitely see it's pulled away. But as I've said before, at the end of the day, if I got to redo the carpet, I'm not really upset about that. I've got, much more invested elsewhere. Another couple $100 ain't gonna kill me. So this will wrap it up for this series of videos. We are down to 2 weeks from tomorrow. Tomorrow being the 30th, I believe. So getting closer, getting closer, getting closer. As always, I appreciate, there goes my window that I've got to fix yet. I do appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. Like, subscribe, post comments. Definitely try and have an interactive page. But for this series of videos, we are finished. My next step is to be getting underneath and doing everything on the bottom side.